We're diving into a genuinely fascinating architectural journey. We're going to explore exactly why engineering teams eventually decide to move away from perfectly good, simple, unified systems and willingly adopt incredibly complex, distributed ones. To really ground this, we'll follow a fictional streaming platform we're calling StreamLab. We're going to watch them transition from a really well-structured application into a fully distributed architecture, and we'll pinpoint the exact moments when their original, highly successful design became a massive roadblock. Let's just jump right in. Right out of the gate, we have to tackle the absolute central paradox of this whole topic. I mean, think about it. If having one application and one single database is undeniably simpler to build, test, and operate, why on earth would an engineering team deliberately turn that into a distributed system? It seems totally counterintuitive, right? Why would you voluntarily invite all the chaos and headache of a network if you literally don't have to? Well, to answer that, we actually need to pause and defend something that gets way too much unfair criticism in the tech world these days. Yep, we're defending the monolith. If you've ever had to go to bat for your team's single repository architecture, you were not wrong. A monolith is absolutely not an inherently bad architecture. In fact, for a brand new product like StreamLab and its early days, a single deployable application is exactly what you want. It's just so simple. One repository is easy for a new dev to understand. One internal process can call another module without any fear of a network request timing out. And you get the beauty of a single database transaction updating several tables all at the exact same time. Initially, that simplicity is a massive, massive strength. But we really need to draw a crucial distinction here. There is a huge difference between a bad monolith, that big ball of mud, that tangled spaghetti code where every part of the system reaches directly into the private internals of every other part, and what StreamLab actually built. StreamLab started with a modular monolith. It's one single application, sure, but it has strong, clear logical boundaries. The identity module doesn't just bypass the rules to grab data from the billing module. The comment section uses clearly defined internal interfaces. This is so absolutely crucial to understand because microservices should literally never be your first tool for fixing bad code. Seriously. Adding a network boundary to a bad monolith doesn't magically fix your design. It just leaves you with bad microservices plus a whole bunch of network latency. Okay, so if StreamLab's code was actually well-designed and modular from the start, what broke? Well, the problem is kicked in precisely because StreamLab's was incredibly successful. The architecture didn't fail because the word monolith suddenly went out of style. It failed because the actual shape of the engineering organization and the sheer volume of their workload fundamentally changed. They were basically suffering from success. If we trace StreamLab's massive growth, you can see the exact breaking point approach. Back in year one, it was a cozy setup. One team supporting maybe 10,000 users. But fast forward to year 4, and boom, you've got 20 different engineering teams serving 10 million users. Suddenly, things get messy. The video team wants to ship a brand new encoding workflow right now. The billing team urgently needs to update subscription rules, and the recommendation team wants to test out a completely different runtime. But they are all still forced to produce just one single deployable artifact together. And that, right there, brings us to the core issue. When an organization in its user base reach this kind of massive scale, that monolithic architecture introduces some very severe bottlenecks. We can basically classify these into 3 core architectural constraints: deployment coupling, scaling coupling, and failure coupling. Let's break these down one by one, starting with deployment. First up is deployment coupling. This happens when an independent business change is entirely tied to shared release coordination. Just imagine the scenario. The billing team is totally ready to ship their code on Monday. The video team finishes their stuff and is ready on Tuesday. But, the comments team has a failing integration test that's holding everything up. Because they all share one deployable unit, those completely unrelated teams are now totally blocking each other. Independent business progress is essentially hijacked by a shared release train. At this point, true team autonomy is basically dead. The second constraint is scaling coupling. Think about the totally different workloads happening inside StreamLab. Video encoding, that is incredibly CPU heavy, it just chews through resources. But the comment section is almost entirely read heavy and relatively lightweight. If the system suddenly needs way more CPU power for video processing, the only way to get it in a monolith is to duplicate the entire StreamLab application. You are literally forced to scale up the billing and search modules just to get more video capacity, which is frankly massively wasteful. And then we have the third constraint, failure coupling. Simply put, a shared process means a shared failure boundary. Imagine a severe memory leak pops up deep inside the recommendation engine. In a monolith, that one isolated error can completely crash the entire StreamLab process. A bad deployment in one tiny, non-critical area forces a total rollback of completely unrelated, highly critical features. The blast radius of any single failure is literally the entire application. So the whole point of microservices is to aggressively attack these three constraints by fundamentally changing the boundaries of deployment, scaling, and failure. But, and this is a massive but, splitting your code across a network is definitely not a free lunch. We have to face the harsh realities of distributed systems. We have to talk about the cost of the network. When you compare these two approaches, the trade-offs of independence become really obvious. In a monolith, a local function call executes immediately. It just works. It doesn't fail because a DNS lookup timed out, and you don't have to serialize your data just to pass it along. But in a microservices architecture, you're replacing all that local simplicity with a network request. Now you are suddenly on the hook for handling latency, implementing retries, dealing with partial failures, and managing data-level fragmentation. The network is fundamentally unreliable, and taking on that burden is the literal price tag you pay for independent deployment. And to actually make paying that hefty price tag worth it, you have to achieve true service autonomy. You have to fully embrace a you build it, you operate it mindset. That means a single team must completely own its API and public contract, its own internal data model, its testing strategy, its deployment pipeline, and its behavior in production. Look, if you split your application code into multiple services but keep every single service reading and writing to the exact same shared database tables, you haven't created autonomy at all. You've just created data-level coupling, but now it's slower because it's across the network. Which leads us to a really crucial rule of thumb to take away from this entire explainer. Microservices are not a maturity badge. Seriously. A 4-person team building a brand new product absolutely shouldn't fragment a well-designed modular application into 20 tiny services just because it looks advanced on an architectural diagram. If you don't actually have the organizational constraints of a massive team or the operational maturity to handle distributed observability, automated deployments, and reliable networking, you are just going to multiply your operational headaches without actually solving a real problem. So knowing all the risks and costs, how does StreamLab finally take the leap? Well, they're smart. They don't try to rewrite the whole massive application from scratch overnight. Instead, they make one very calculated, very deliberate step toward a distributed architecture. They decide to execute their very first service extraction. To pull this off successfully, they basically followed 3 clear steps. First, they hunted down a capability that already had a really clean, well-defined boundary. Second, they made sure that specific capability could easily tolerate asynchronous processing. And third, they finally extracted it. The absolute perfect candidate? Notifications. Think about it. Email and push delivery are operationally totally distinct from the core user video streaming request path. They desperately need to scale independently, and if a welcome email gets sent a few seconds later asynchronously, it's totally fine. Plus, because they started with a modular monolith, the notifications module already had a super narrow, clean interface. So now, looking at the evolved architecture, you still have the incredibly robust StreamLab monolith doing the vast majority of the heavy lifting for the core business logic. But alongside it, you now have a brand new, completely independent notification service. For the first time ever, StreamLab isn't just one deployment anymore, it's 2. And this is a huge takeaway. It proves that you don't have to rewrite everything at once to start relieving those organizational bottlenecks. You just solve the constraints exactly where they hurt the most. But of course, successfully extracting that one service means StreamLab has officially crossed the Rubicon. They are now officially operating a distributed system. And that leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to wrap up on today. The code is split, yes, but they still have to work together seamlessly as one unified platform for the user. So how does the monolith actually find that notification service out on the network when its IP address might be constantly changing? Who actually owns the user data now? What exactly happens when the network between them inevitably fails? And how do they actually communicate securely? Those are the exact, incredibly tricky distributed puzzles we'll need to solve next time. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, always keep questioning exactly why and how your architectures are built.